Well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, and it's the second day of September. So yesterday we wrapped up Second Thessalonians. So today we are going to jump into the Gospel of John, and so we're going to start right off with the prologue of John today. But before we get to that, I want to give you just a little bit of background on John. I'll try to do that first few days as we go through John to give you a little bit more insight into John's gospel. But John is a favorite of many. It is different than the other three Gospels. The Matthew, Mark, and Luke are often called the synoptics. One vision is what that means because they are similar. And again, as you've probably heard, and as I probably said when we went through Luke, generally it's believed that Mark was written first and that Luke and Matthew used Mark as well as this hypothesized document called Q. We've never found a copy of Q, but we can see it within the writings of Luke and Matthew that they're referring to this, and you have some things that are very similar in Mark or in Luke and Matthew that are not in Mark at all. But John's gospel's different. It's considerably different in that the synoptics are roughly a year long for Jesus' ministry. In Mark rather, some say it's even shortened down to about 10 months length in Mark. John's gospel, it's about a 3-year ministry. So the ministry length is considerably different. It is not the longest in volume, but it is, by looking at that, it's the longest in breadth of the time period of Jesus' ministry that it covers. It's 3 times as long, but it's not longer than the others necessarily in verbiage. If we look at it in the Greek, Luke is clearly the longest. In fact, Luke is the first of the New Testament Bibles to pop up on the list of the longest books. It's the 12th longest book in the Bible, having 19,482 words in at least one of the Greek manuscripts. There are variations in the manuscripts. That doesn't count in English because in English or any other language, we sometimes condense words or we extract words or lengthen and use 3 or 4 words for one Greek word. That flux and floats. Okay, next on our list of lengthy Bible or books in the New Testament that show up as the longest books in the Bible would be Acts, which comes in at number 15 with 18,450 words. So you can see that the author of Luke and Acts got a great deal of the New Testament. That would be adds up to 37,000, basically almost 38,000 words that we have there in Luke and Acts. Matthew comes in as number 16 with 18,346 words. And then John shows up at number 20. It's the 20th longest book out of 66 in the Bible with 15,635 words. And poor little Mark, shows up at 23 with 11,304 words. That's one of the reasons why Mark wasn't necessarily the most favoritist. Is that a word? The most favored of the Gospels. There's some evidence that shows that the Gospel of Peter was more widely used than the Gospel of Mark, but partly because Mark's Gospel is shorter, and we tend to like that content. We want one thing, it doesn't have the birth story, neither does John. John doesn't have a humanly birth story. It has a creation story, though. Mark doesn't have that. And so we can see why Luke or Matthew or John might be favored over Mark in that way. And with the original ending of Mark, it just chops off. And so that makes people a little uncomfortable. I think that was a literary device. We haven't done Mark's gospel. Maybe we'll do that next and compare Mark to John. But at any rate, John's gospel does cover more time period for the ministry than the others, so it's different. Those word numbers, just to give us a little bit of an idea there, the total number of Greek words in the New Testament are around 138,162. Again, I think that could vary from one manuscript to the other. And those 138,000 such words are comprised of 5,437 different Greek words 319 of which those words comprise nearly 80% of the New Testament. So those, of course, are connector words and such, and is that kind of thing. Those types of words, and of course other words that will be theologically important words that would show up there. And you might want to know, what is the longest book in the Bible? Since we come into number 12 before we get to Luke, that would be Jeremiah with over 33,000 words. So you can see that poor little Mark's gospel is about barely more than a third the size of Jeremiah. So with that, let's talk a little bit specifically about John's gospel. Church tradition would hold that John the Apostle wrote John's gospel. Other traditions hold that John the elder of the Johannian community wrote this gospel. I think that latter is probably more likely, in my opinion, that it was written by the elder that also wrote the first, second, and third John, the Johannian epistles. I personally think it was probably written after the Johannian epistles. That's my theory. I haven't. One of the things I haven't been able to do in the last few years is to try. Before I came here, I was thinking I was going to try to chase down that to see if I could come up with any clues whether I could support that. But I haven't had time since I've been here to do that. Maybe when I get really old and I can't read anymore, I'll somehow try to chase it down. I don't know. But that's just my suspicion that there are some things in John's gospel that are explained by reading the epistles first and then thinking that he's writing towards those epistles, if that makes sense. If it's written by John the Apostle, he's a very old man when he writes this, because it's most likely written somewhere in the 90s, the very end of the first century. And so if John wrote it, he would have been extremely old for that time period, especially. He'd be old in today's standards, but for that first century time period, he would have been a very, very old man. And for him to have been able to write a letter such as this, or a gospel such as this at that age, that would have been stunning. Let's put it that way. Would be a miracle, which there are a few of those in the Bible, so we won't preclude that by any means. It is probably one of the last books written that we have in the Scripture, especially, most likely. My theory is that the pastorals are probably the last Bible or books written that are in the Bible. But John would be towards that end also. It's certainly the last of the Gospels. They would have been written after Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Generally, again, Mark would be considered to be the oldest of the four Gospels that we have in the canon. So, with that, we've gone quite a long time with an introduction. Let's jump into the Scripture before we we've run this too long. John chapter 1. We're going to look at verses 1 to 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Of course, this is very reminiscent of the first few words of Genesis. So this is John's creation story. John doesn't have an earthly birth story like Matthew and Luke, but he goes all the way back to the creation. Jesus is there in the creation, and it is through him all things came into being, through Christ. And without him, not one thing came into being. Jesus is the preeminent force of creation. The Word is Jesus, okay? First of all, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, okay? And the Word was God. So Jesus, the divinity of Jesus is there. That's the other thing about Mark's Gospel, or John's Gospel. It has the highest of all Christologies. Mark's has the lowest. Matthew and Luke kind of fall somewhere in the middle. So we'll talk more about the Christology tomorrow. Here, the word here, and it says where it says life, that is the word zoe. And you probably, that's a name we use for Zoe or Zoe. And that word means life. It means both physical and spiritual life. Particularly, it means a future existence. And that future existence is sustained by God. So in him was life. In him was our future life, our eternal life, spiritual life, life immortal. Okay? So that's something very important to latch onto, that promise. And that, of course, carries all the way through John. It's this focus on the life to come. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness. Literally, that means literally it means physical light, but figuratively it means spiritual, or it means physical darkness. Literally or figuratively, it means spiritual darkness. And here, I think, since he's talking about this life to come sustained by God, I think we read this as a spiritual darkness. Okay, the light shines in the darkness of the Spirit, and the darkness did not overcome it. Now that overcome word is an interesting word, because it can also mean comprehended. And the darkness did not comprehend it. Darkness did not comprehend the light that was shoving away, the clearing away, the spiritual darkness. The darkness, that force of spiritual darkness can't comprehend the light, the light of God, the love of God. And I think that's true. I think that whenever I read it and I think it that way, it can't overcome it, but perhaps maybe closer again, comprehend it. It just can't figure it out. It doesn't understand it, and therefore rebels against it. We tend to look at us as human beings. We tend to rebel against that we don't understand. Things we don't understand scare us. It's hard to understand a God that loves you so much that he forgives you for every sin, forgives you through Christ for every awful thing that you've done, no matter how awful that it might be. We have a hard time comprehending that. And I'm certainly thinking that the spirit of darkness can't comprehend it. But it can't overcome it either. In the end, we read through John's gospel, and it is a gospel of immense and eternal hope. And we'll get there with that. So with that, I'm going to come to a quick close, because we've gone on about 13, 14 minutes here, and that's longer than I like these to be nowadays. I like to keep these a little more concise. So come on back tomorrow. We'll talk a little more about the structure of John, perhaps a little more about what goes on with John. That we'll get started with talking about John, the man that was John. Okay. So with that, I'm going to let you go. Enjoy the day. Have a blessed day, and please, 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 as always, be a blessing to someone today. See you tomorrow. Oh, don't forget, today's Thursday. We have drive-through communion at 5 to 5:15, and I'll be back here tonight at 7 to post up a song. All right. Bye-bye.